Hello, my name is Ivan and I am a NAFO fella. I want to offer you a new column today, and I really hope you will like it. I have Anna as a guest today. And today we want to talk in more detail with this girl, who she is and what she does. Anna, hello.
Hello.
I'd love to hear how you got into the army.
It's a pretty long story. When the war in Ukraine began, I was only 15 years old. I was still in high school. All these events began with the annexation of Crimea. Then parts of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions were occupied. We had visits from people serving in the military, who at the time were active in the anti-terrorist operation zone, then in the Joint Forces operation. And I always found this interesting, because I've always been a patriot of our country. I'm concerned about the future of our country. That's why I was interested in what they do. And I wanted to get involved in this somehow in the future, too. When I went to college, I had a chance to go to the military academy and graduate with the rank of reserve officer. At that time, I was studying to become a paratrooper as my military job. I'm experienced in parachuting. I know how to fold a parachute. I've also jumped with a parachute in Kyiv, here, in the capital.
And how many times?
47 times.
Quite a few times.
It's a lot, but not enough. So then I ended up graduating with the rank of reserve officer, junior lieutenant. And then I just lived a normal life. For me, personally, the war became less important, as it did for many Ukrainians. The war seemed like it was far away. It was in the east. The media did not report on military battles that often. Nobody was really talking about it. And then, at the beginning of 2022, on February 24th, I was at home. At 5 a.m., I woke up from the sound of explosions and from bright flashes on the horizon. Then I looked at Telegram and saw that Putin had declared war on us. I called my relatives and went to see them outside the city. I waited until noon, and then I decided to go to the recruitment office. When I got there, at first they said, "Why did you come? You're a girl. Go home." But you know, in the first days of the full-scale invasion, there were so many volunteers, and with a very wide age range. There were young guys, 18-year-olds, and older ones, people of a pretty advanced age. There were folks who had taken part in the ATO, and just young people who were absolutely patriotic and ready to stand up and defend their country. At that time, there was fighting in the capital. And people who had no combat experience, who had absolutely no idea how to fire a weapon, who'd never held an automatic rifle, they were ready. They took the initiative and went to defend our country. Since I was an officer, I didn't really have a choice. They needed me. I had to go to the recruitment office. And so I've been with the Armed Forces of Ukraine since the first day. My journey started in Odessa with the 126th Brigade of the Territorial Defense in southern Ukraine. At first, we were in the Mykolaiv region. We freed the Mykolaiv region and the city of Kherson. After that, we've moved to the east of our country.
Very interesting, fascinating story. I want to tell our viewers that we are filming this interview on the eve of the second anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But in reality, the war has been going on for more than 2 years. It's been going on for 10 years. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely. I hope this war will end very soon and that we will win it. In my opinion, the ideal end would be if Russia ceases to exist. It will fall apart into separate, sovereign countries, each with its own culture. The Russian Federation as a country simply should not exist in the world.
Very nice and powerful words. I agree with you. You know, it would be very interesting to hear from you about the attitude of the army towards women, towards girls. Have you encountered any problems or prejudices?
I can only speak of my own experience. Everything depends on the unit you end up in. I've been lucky. I've always been surrounded by people who've been pretty supportive of my interests and my drive to show what I'm made of. This desire to show your stuff comes out, and it depends on your personality. I always wanted to be on the front line and to be directly involved in combat. What I mean is, I always wanted to play an active role. There are people who have the same desire to help, but for whatever reason, either they're scared or they don't have the physical skills, so they use their skills in another way to be directly involved. For example, they work in the headquarters, doing the paperwork. There are people who use their social status as a media personality, like bloggers or other famous people, to work on fundraising and sharing information about how things really stand on the front lines. For example, some people tell the stories of military service people who've been injured. Or they tell the stories of those who, unfortunately, have been killed. Some people talk about service members who are prisoners of war, or encourage people to go out to demonstrations to show both Ukrainian society and the international community what is going on in our country. I think this is a very important part of our work, because it is incredibly important to share real, true information. It's important for people to know how the war is going and to know that there are still civilians stuck in combat zones. There are civilians who simply do not have the physical means to leave occupied territories. We have to talk about the people who Russia is holding captive. We have to keep talking about them, and we cannot forget that the war is still going on and that innocent people are being killed.
In fact, there are a lot of Ukrainian prisoners of war in captivity. It's important to talk about it, it's important to remember about it, and it's important to know about it. Because they have relatives, these people have parents, maybe children, and families who are waiting for them. That's why we all want all our Ukrainian prisoners of war to come home. You've told us a lot about yourself, how you found yourself in the war, but we don't know what you do currently. Could you please tell us about your occupation? What are your responsibilities? Any specifics of your work that you can tell us?
I think a lot of folks in the military have been able to try out many different jobs over the course of their service, and I am no exception. I was in charge of a reconnaissance group, and right now I'm the commander of a mortar platoon. How did I get this job? Really, I just went to an interview, and as we talked, they understood that my intentions are serious, that I'm not afraid, and that I really do want to learn. At the time when I was interviewing, I didn't really know about all the nuts and bolts of the job. They told me I would have to learn everything rather quickly. They offered me a kind of trial period to test me out, and I got down to learning. How did I learn? At first, I was just looking on the internet and watching YouTube videos, asking other military folks and mortar gunners about their experience. I asked other officers working in the combat zone about what it was like. Even once we got close to the front line, I kept learning, including how to use the Kropyva combat management software, how to set up and direct the mortar, and a lot of other things. I learned all this right on the front line. How did people treat me? At first, you could say they didn't take me very seriously, because I'm pretty young, I'm 25 years old, and I'm a woman. When I first met the guys, we started getting down to business right away. And they quickly understood that there are times when it's okay to make jokes, and there is the time when you need to really work. So I experienced some prejudice in the first couple days, but that was it. We very quickly got to work.
І дуже швидко ми приступили до справжньої роботи.
We were positioned in the Mykolaiv area at the beginning of the full-scale invasion.
В Миколаївському напрямку на початку повномасштабного
And if you compare 2022 with 2024, then the war has changed a lot.
війна дуже сильно змінилася. Якщо
If you take into account that at the beginning, our enemy did not have Mavics or Lancet drones, there were no combat UAVs in use.
ворога не було ланцетів, не було різних ударних БПЛА.
You'd get nervous about one Orlan drone flying above,
Ти боявся, що
and the most you would fear is that the enemy's mortars and artillery would fire at you.
а потім
But things evolve, and the enemy is also developing its capabilities. At the beginning, everyone said we were fighting against untrained people, that their force is weak, but that's not the case. Our enemy is strong, the enemy is smart, and the enemy is evolving. Over there, at the national level, they are producing new kinds of weapons that are much more terrifying than artillery. With artillery, it works in certain weather conditions, and many different factors affect the shell's trajectory in flight. Now, for example, if you take an FPV or any other combat drone, it's being steered by a person in real time. So even if you've shifted 20 or 30 meters, or you ran away or drove off, that drone can change its course and still hit you.
і вразити тебе. Тобто
In other words, if we used to be afraid of being struck by shelling or that a tank would open fire, now you really have to worry about Lancets and other drones like FPVs.
типу FPV. Тому
Now we have a real need for all kinds of electronic warfare and jamming devices to protect you from UAVs.
від БПЛА. Ось так.
That's interesting. You raised the topic of the technological component of war and talked about what our enemy uses. Could you share some details about the types of weapons that you personally or perhaps your unit has used? What are these weapons and how do they work?
На початку
What was great at the beginning is that we had Starlink. And so we always had excellent communication with our firing position, with headquarters, with each other.
тобто ми
So we didn't worry that our radio might stop working because we could use certain messaging platforms to communicate with each other.
спілкуватися один з одним. Але, до речі, я чула,
But you know, I've heard that our enemies have also started using Starlink. And I have to ask, Elon Musk, what the hell? Why does our enemy now have technology that helps them through satellite communication? It is incredibly useful in contemporary warfare.
у сучасному
I mean, if they didn't have internet, then that would seriously compromise their capabilities for waging war.
You are probably referring to satellite internet, which works anywhere on the battlefield.
Well, yes. Starlink usually works from anywhere. Although we did have a situation in the Kherson region where some 5 kilometers from the river there was no way to get the Starlink to work. We were simply out of range of Starlink. Our radios were all we could rely on.
надія лише на рації і все.
In order to get internet, you had to take a number of steps. You had to drive further out, and then we could get a signal.
Подалі, і тоді вже ми були на зв'язку. Працювати було досить
It was pretty hard to work in those conditions, because when you're working, say, when you're collecting aerial intelligence, it's all streaming.
стрімлять.
As they're flying, you watch on a screen in real time, and you see everything the enemy is doing. You see their positions, you see them, digging their trenches, you see the building they all go into, like where their observation posts are probably located.
Спостережні пости. Все
It's all very easy to see, especially in the wintertime, when there are no leaves on the trees.
зеленого листя.
And when there's no signal, then you can't watch the live stream if there is no internet.
Це дуже сильно
This made our working conditions much worse. We had to rely on encoded coordinates and to speak on the radio in code, because there's no guarantee that someone won't be listening in on your radio.
не буде прослуховуватись, а казати
And you certainly can't give away the coordinates of your position. And it's also not worth disclosing the coordinates of your enemy's position, because they can either drive away or change position, or they'll realize that you're talking about them, and so they'll do something to prevent you from spotting them again.
Його не змогли вирахувати. Вот.
You mentioned Starlink and drones that live stream online. What weapons did you use? The war has been active for more than 2 years. Can I hear your opinion on how the war has changed?
В Україні
Well, in Ukraine last week, as far as I know, the president gave an order to create a new branch of the military dedicated to combat drones and FPVs. So our enemy uses drones, and so do we, and they're afraid of us, and we're afraid of them. Each side does not want to be struck by an FPV drone.
зі сторін він не хоче, щоб FPV-шка прилетіла саме в нього. От. А по
As for foreign weapons, yes. Especially at the start of the full-scale invasion, it was nice to see and to hear from friends that they'd received, say, foreign rounds for an 81mm caliber mortar. They are better as far as flight trajectory, and they have a greater range. And there were more of them than, say, the remaining Soviet rounds for the 82mm caliber mortar. We also heard from our colleagues that we'd received the 3 axes. That's what we call the M777 howitzer.
ми саме
We were working with mortars, so we were using mostly old Soviet weapons. But they still killed the enemy, and that is what we liked. And we still like it.
вбивало ворога, і нам це подобалось. І подобається зараз. От.
Війна вже в активній фазі. Більше
To what extent has it become technologically advanced since the beginning to what we have now? How much has the battlefield changed during this time?
від початку і те, що ми маємо зараз. Наскільки змінилося поле бою за цей час?
Я можу сказати те, що
I can say that I certainly do not envy anybody who is beginning military service now. Because for me and my unit, for example, we still had time for some little mistakes. We had time to learn and to improve our skills as events were unfolding.
себе вдосконалювати.
Anyone who arrives at the front line today, they just won't be able to take in so much information.
Не зможе усвоїти. Якщо ти ходиш
When you're walking outside, enemy drones are watching you. When you're driving in a vehicle, enemy drones are watching. And if they see you, then that means that there's either a shell or an FPV drone or something else flying your way, and it can most likely kill you.
варто розуміти,
You should realize that you must behave more secretively so that you don't stand out.
що якось таємничо, ти не повинен виділятися. Наприклад,
For instance, I had red hair at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. You can't do that now. You won't always have your hair covered. It's better just to dye your hair so that it's less noticeable.
просто взяти і перефарбуватися, і бути менш...
For our own safety, of course.
Хоча це
Yes, it's about your safety first, but it's also about the safety of your personnel, who you live with.
якщо
Because if the enemy's aerial intelligence holds out, then they can simply follow to see where you're going, into which building or what place you're driving to.
в яке саме
And they will wait, and they will know that there is other personnel there, in addition to you.
особовий склад,
Of course, one girl with red hair, striking her, maiming or killing her is nice. But they can wait 10 minutes for that girl to enter a building, and there will be more people there. And of course, their priority is to hit the greatest number of our personnel. That's why it's worth being more covert. It's worth thinking first and then doing.
думати,
But you don't always have a lot of time to think. So you have to make decisions quickly. And your life and the lives of your brothers in arms depend on how right your decision is.
During this time, I think the war has changed you quite a lot. You have probably become a completely different person that you were before in civilian life. But I would like to hear, maybe you can tell me, what you were interested in, what you did before the full-scale invasion. What were your hobbies?
Before the full-scale invasion, I had a regular job, just like everybody else. But the thing that made me a teensy-weensy bit different is that I was into skydiving. You know, the aerodrome was in Borodyanka. That city was devastated in the first month of the full-scale invasion, and the airfield was devastated too. I've jumped 47 times. A lot of my fellow parachuting friends have also joined the army, or they volunteer or donate, or they've learned tactical medicine, and now they teach tactical medicine to people in the military. They train them to perform first aid on the battlefield, to help their brothers in arms and themselves. You know, each of us learns tactical medicine in the first place to be able to give yourself first aid. You learn how to put a tourniquet on your own limbs. The first 30 seconds, while you're still conscious, are critical for saving your life.
The information is a little bit shocking, to be honest, because you have to go through this, and you really did, and you are telling us now. It's very valuable to hear this information from you as a person who works directly on the battlefield. I would also like to return to the topic of your past life before the war. How did your parents react to your decision to join the armed forces, and did they support you?
Yes, and they continue to support me. But when I first went to enlist, my mother begged me to wait, at least for a couple days, just to see how things would develop. But it immediately occurred to me, if everybody just sits and waits to see what will happen, then after a few days, an orc will just enter our yard and say in Russian, "Hello, this is Russia." I did not want that to happen. I love my country. I believe that Odessa is a wonderful city in Ukraine, which will never be part of Russia, no matter what the government of the RF wants. When I went to enlist, my father decided to join the army too. Right now, he is serving in Ukraine's east, in the Donetsk region. I worry a lot about him, because I was more prepared to serve, psychologically, while my father had some personal development to do. His mind is not of a military persuasion, but he's been a military man for 2 years now, and I'm very proud of him. He has also taken part in some operations that I, for one, would not have sent him on. If I were his commander, I would have said, "No, you shouldn't go. It's too dangerous." He participated in the evacuation of the body of one of his brothers in arms, which was practically in an occupied village in the Donetsk region. He participated in the evacuation of the body of one of his brothers in arms. It was practically in an occupied village in the Donetsk region. He went together with his other brothers in arms, who unfortunately were killed. There were 3 of them, my father and 2 brothers in arms. Only my father survived. But I hope that all this will end very soon, and that my father will return home, to my mom and to my sister, to our yard, which he loves, to mow the lawn, to take care of the fish, to peaceful civilian life.
It would be interesting to return to the topic of your service and hear what exactly you are responsible for and what you do in your unit. If you can tell us some details, that would be great.
My responsibilities include, well, of course, I manage the personnel and determine certain goals that they are supposed to achieve. I also go with them on reconnaissance to select the positions for their work. Of course, we do this in pairs, together with the unit commander or the commanders of the crew or mortar team. Afterward, once the work is underway, then, of course, reporting is one of a commander's essential duties.
роботи командира.
Yes, the work itself is very important, for sure. But afterward, you have to account for every round, for everything that's been used up,
Відзвітуватися,
for where it went, did it hit the target or not, how effective was it? And then you write reports on all the supplies that were used or destroyed.
щодо використаного або знищеного майна. Також
Sometimes my responsibilities can also include being a driver, even though I'm a commander. But sometimes you have to drive the personnel to a certain point and pick them up afterward.
привести особовий склад на певну точку, забрати їх.
I can also go for food supplies, go get gas or other provisions.
Паливом чи
So yes, you're an officer, you perform your duties. But if another person who is supposed to perform other duties is busy or manning the position, or say they've gotten sick, then you have to fill in for them. You can assign somebody else to do it, or if you have time, you just perform their duties yourself.
до плюсів я би віднесла
On the plus side, I can say that I've made new friends who've become like family over these past 2 years. I know that they will do anything for me, and I will also do everything in my power for them.
все, що від мене залежить.
Another plus is that I'm growing. For whatever it's worth, you master new kinds of weaponry, and you continue to gain new knowledge, skills, habits. I don't know if they will all be useful later in civilian life, but right now it's all very interesting.
Але зараз це дуже цікаво. Потім нові знайомства.
And then there are new relationships, like when you're in the combat zone and you get to know other units, and some of those people can become your close friends in ordinary civilian life.
Тебе другом і в звичайному цивільному житті. Мінуси – це те, що у
As for the minuses, one is that for many of us, life is on hold. I don't have a family of my own, no husband, no kids. But among my personnel, they have spouses and children. And of course, those people want to see their fathers at home instead of worrying about them.
батьків вдома, не хвилюватися за них.
You'd like to know that a person will live to old age and get to see their grandchildren and all that.
Все інше. Також мінус – це
Another minus is that your health really suffers, both your physical and your mental health.
психічне здоров'я.
I think it would be really worthwhile to have programs on the national level to engage psychologists to work with people serving in the military.
Роботи з психологами військовослужбовців, бо
Because sometimes we feel like there's nobody supporting us and that we are all alone.
підтримки або
And then you don't want to talk to anybody, not even to your loved ones who worry so much about you.
навіть з тими ж рідними, які за тебе дуже сильно переживають.
Another minus is that you could be killed.
Ти можеш загинути, і те, що ти можеш
And the possibility of seeing someone who's a close friend in a condition in which you would never want to see them,
в тому стані, в якому
like if they're severely injured or even witnessing this person's death. It's very hard to bear. When you were talking to somebody just a couple hours before, and then after a shelling, you hear on the radio that this person was killed.
200-та і
And you go to the position and see that it's impossible to identify their body.
впізнати по тілу неможливо.
You recognize their insignia, you recognize their uniform, their protective gear, but not their physical features.
Також до плюсів
Another thing I can add to the plus side is that we learn tactical medicine, which is not only useful on the battlefield, but also in civilian life. For instance, my guys provided first aid to some people after a car accident. They applied tourniquets and pressure bandages. Tactical medicine is something that everybody should learn, not just those who serve in the military.
враховуючи те, що
As long as this war is not won, cities far from the front line are being struck by missiles, and so it's always possible that people will be injured.
можливість того, що хтось отримає травму при цьому, тому
So my advice is to always carry a first aid kit in your car and carry a tourniquet on your person,
мати якісь
at least 2, along with a pressure bandage.
хоча б там 2 штуки.
That way, If there's an air raid, you can provide aid to anybody who's injured.
Щоб надати допомогу людям, які отримали.
In my opinion, saving lives is something that's incredibly simple. And it's something that each one of us, for better or for worse, needs to know how to do.
Потрібно, щоб вміло робити всі ми.
Everyone ought to learn medicine.
Медицину варто всім.
Я згідний з тобою.
I agree with you. This is actually a very important skill. And not only in Ukraine or in a war, you need to know it because you might save someone's life, even if it's by accident. And to conclude our conversation, I would like to ask you an interesting question that is primary concern to us, all Ukrainians. What can we do to speed up our victory? I know that we're watched by many people from all over the world, and perhaps there are certain words you would like to convey to them to make them realize something or pay attention to some things.
Я вважаю, що просто
I think that each one of us must do everything possible to bring about our victory. Don't forget that we are a distinct nation with our own culture, our own language, and history, and we should be proud of this. It's worth releasing new songs and to keep showing where you're from.
не варто
Don't be shy about shouting that the war is ongoing. The war is still happening. People are dying. And that we need new weapons, and more ammunition. We need to keep helping our defenders and to keep donating and volunteering.
волонтерити.
Join the army if you can and help in this way.
Допомагай такими справами.
If you can't, if your health is poor or you can be more useful working in another sphere, then do absolutely everything you can to help those who are serving in the military. With their hands, you are contributing to our victory. It is also important to keep sharing true information about the war in the information sphere. Do not forget about the people who are being held captive by Russia. And do not forget about the people who are living under occupation. If anyone here is watching from the occupied territories, please know that we have not forgotten you, and we want you to return home, to Ukraine. Keep your spirits up, because the armed forces of Ukraine will come and free you, and you'll be home again.
Very good words to end of our conversation. I would like to thank you, Anya, for this wonderful conversation, for taking the time to record this interview with us, and for sharing such important and very interesting information with the world. Thank you very much. Friends, thank you for being with us during this interview. Let me remind you that this is our new format, and we would be very grateful if you would like this video and subscribe to our channel.
Hello. 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 Hello.